All right, what's going on, everybody? My name is Mark Holmes, aka the Deacon. This is another episode of TalentXM. This is episode 4. Luckily, we're here because we have a brave soul, Caitlin Heyer. This is my guest. Say hi, Caitlin.
What's up, everyone?
How you doing? How you doing? It's nice and sunny here in Chicago, surprisingly in November. So, I mean, you could be doing anything else right now, walking your dog or just sunbathing, but you're here with me, so thank you for that. Um, just to kind of give a introduction of Caitlin, I've known Caitlin now for probably what, 4 years?
Yeah.
I think actually most of my recruiting career, I've worked side by side, on and off with Caitlin. So, um, starting first at Populous Group, which is would you say staffing agency or more
Staffing
HR service?
agency.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we were in the recruiting department. That's where we first met, and actually I learned a lot from Caitlin. I probably bugged her with a ton of trivial recruiting question for advice. Maybe I was telling her a bunch of corny jokes, or
All of the above. It was great.
singing and humming continuously, just annoying everybody. But uh, sometime in between there, our most recent position, we worked together at Microsoft.
Mhm.
Luckily, we were even on the same team as well, so it's just like old times. Um, and I think why I asked Caitlin here today is actually kind of exciting for me. In my other episodes, yeah, I spoke to people that I thought were talented and interesting. This is still the case. However, public service announcement, Caitlin and I are both unemployed. Why is this exciting? Because this is an opportunity, I think, to really um, use this time and Talent XM for what my original vision for it was, to be able to provide, whether in the searching or the job seeking process, interview process, provide more of a personal touch to hiring managers and recruiters out there that goes beyond a resume. So, um, we're gonna, I guess, talk about Caitlin and what she's looking for, her strengths and her background and everything like that. So, um, speaking of unemployment, how's that been going for you? What's going on in your head? It's been what, about 3 weeks now.
Yeah.
What's your process been?
Man, there's a lot of job applications going out. There's a lot of, connecting with people, looking for ways to try and find like a way in. There's not a ton out there right now just due to this current economy. So it's been a little bit rough. But it's given me some time to kind of take into consideration things that I really want to do in the future and things that maybe I've done, but don't necessarily want to do again, and some things like that. So it's been a good time for thinking about stuff like that and just kind of preparing for that next step, whatever it's going to be.
Right, right. And is this just out of curiosity, is this the first time that I guess we were both laid off?
Mhm.
I'm sure a lot of people know what's going on in the tech world, big tech. Is this the first time you've been in a position where you had to look for a job without currently having one? I know for me, this is a new experience.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. So, after leaving like education and stuff like that, I was kind of in a similar spot where I was working like part-time, serving, stuff like that. But even then, like I had something to kind of keep me going. So this was really, like you said, the first time I've experienced this. But so it's been an adjustment for sure.
Right,
Kind of came unexpectedly. Obviously, a number of us were hit by it. So I'm sure you'll hear this story multiple times throughout this type of show and everything. So it's just
right,
something that we're taking as it comes and learning as we go and making the best of it, trying not
for
to
sure.
lose our minds in the meantime.
I've actually been surprisingly calm throughout this process.
Mhm.
Just trying not to rush anything, rush into anything. Like you said, assessing what it is that I want, what my next step should be. I guess I've been doing a lot more of this. I guess that's how I'm staying sane right now. But when you mention, I guess the all the applications and the reaching out to people, the network and stuff like that. A lot of people say it's all about networking, whether there's an actual skill for that or not. But all of my jobs always came from somebody presenting something to me. Um, in this case, it's a little different, and I'm noticing on job applications, there's a lot of, I mean, things I didn't even know were there. For instance, the whole website thing. A lot of companies are asking for the personal website.
Yeah.
Um, which is kind of strange to me. Do you feel like, does that stress you out at all? Like, i- I mean, you've been applying, so if I keep getting rejection emails. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's different for sure. I know whenever I've applied before, it's either been through like a recruiter or somebody who had reached out to me and said, "Hey, there's this opening, you should check it out. I'll, put a recommendation in for you or something." So it felt a little bit like, here's my resume, a little bit about me, and that's about it. I feel like companies are trying to look a little bit past what's on a resume right now and kind of get to know the person. So exactly, a good market for this. Um, I think it's also something where like the resume isn't always enough, because you don't get to see, how the person actually works. There's been a number of applications I've put in where they'll lead me to some kind of survey afterwards or some kind of like assessment or things like that, which are supposed to kind of get an idea for what your personality type is, how you work with others, things like that. So, yeah, it's definitely not just about a resume anymore. It's
well,
either, like you said, about like the connections or just kind of digging past that. Like, who are you as a person? How do you work? How do you function well? Things like that.
hmm well, good thing we're here because that's
Yeah,
what this is for. But
definitely.
speaking of personality and everything, so going beyond then, and we'll get into work history and where we've worked and things like that. Um, but tell me, or tell the audience, tell these hiring managers, recruiters more about, I guess, your background. And I guess specifically, I know that you're big with music, you're
Mhm.
educated in music. Um, uh, but yeah, tell me about that. Who is Caitlin?
Yeah, yeah. So really, starting out, when I was a kid, I was always doing music stuff. I was playing piano a lot, did a lot of piano lessons. I was almost always having some gigs as I got a little older,
Wow.
whether it was like sometimes it was just stuff with like a church, sometimes it was, like local groups, stuff like that. So I grew up in like Champaign area. So Central Illinois, right by University of Illinois. It's like a little town in the middle of the rest of Illinois, which is just cornfields and bean fields and stuff like that. So,
So not
kind of
Chicago is what you mean?
not Chicago, not at all. So, starting out in like a small town, there's always, room for stuff like that. There's restaurants that want gigs on Friday nights, stuff like that. So, I always had something to do. I was playing, performing there. Um, so, when it came time to kind of decide what I wanted to do, music was kind of an easy choice because I already knew I was decent at it. And then, I enjoyed it and thought, like, okay, so how can I turn this into a career? Did some research, came across music therapy. So now some people may not know what music therapy is. So I'll just kind of briefly explain. First, to be a music therapist, you have to have at least a bachelor's degree. And then you have to take a board certified exam. So similar to if you want to be an attorney, you go through school and then you pass the bar exam. Music therapy, kind of similar situation. So the reason I thought music therapy was, that's a way to really help people, doing something I'm really good at and also kind of seeing the rewards of that. So, seeing people like overcome challenges in their life, seeing people progress in ways that they maybe couldn't before that. So by using music therapy, it's basically just taking music as the intervention for therapy. So sometimes you would have, well, you would always have these individualized goals for your
Hmm.
candidates, for your. You
You're
can
a
tell I've been
recruiter
a
now.
recruiter now. Yeah, exactly. So, so you could work in like a group setting with different clients, or you could work individualized. Either way, there's individualized goals, and sometimes that's something about movement. Maybe it's people who are dealing with like arthritis, or even just like injury recovery, things like that. If learning to play an instrument can help them, progress a certain level of movement, then that's what we're there to provide. Sometimes it's stability, being able to walk either in a straight line or to a certain rhythm. Um, Music can really help with that. There's a lot of, clinical and evidence-based use of music therapy that's really, really cool. It helps with anxiety, PTSD, the list goes on and on. So, looking into this, there's obviously a wide variety of people I can work with. Do something I'm pretty good at with music, and then also be able to help people along the
Mm,
way. So that's kind of what led me into music therapy. Um, as I was going through the program, I was doing all the classes, learning all about it. It was great. Um, and then I got into a practicum where I basically got to do music therapy with a group of clients.
kind of like an internship.
Yeah, kind
Okay.
of. So still in school. This isn't paid or anything. It's just hands-on experience.
I like nurses
Um,
in clinical trials.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
So
smart.
yeah, yeah, you got this. By the time we're done, you can be a music
Mm,
therapist. Just
maybe.
kidding. Um, but yeah, so getting into practicum, I started to realize some of the red tape that goes in with music therapy. So, what I mean by that is I would be able to, use music, have these really powerful moments with people where they'd make this huge recovery, or maybe, I worked with elderly at the time, so people who struggled with dementia were suddenly singing along with words that
Mm,
they didn't even know that they knew, and stuff like that. So really cool. Where I found the red tape was that was all I could do. um, I wasn't licensed as a therapist to be
mhm.
able to facilitate those discussions about why was this important, what made you remember this, tell me about that memory, let's, dive into that.
I see.
So there was only so much I could really accomplish. um, and I started to get frustrated with that. I
Mhm.
didn't like not being able to make the impact I had hoped to make, and that I personally felt through music. Like
Right.
it was just nice to be able to kind of sit down and express myself through music in some way. So when I found that for myself, I wanted it for others, and when that wasn't always going to be a possibility, I started to think like, is this really what I want to do?
Mm, I
Um,
see. 'Cause I was thinking as you were mentioning, especially when once you mentioned dementia and the benefits it could have for someone like that, now my psychology brain starts kicking in. I'm seeing some intersection there, given my education in psychology, right? So
yeah.
now it makes sense. I would imagine then to be able to really consult on a therapeutic level or provide those insights, you might have would you need a PhD or a master's at least or something like that?
That, or like a double degree. I'd have to actually
Mm,
be a therapist, like a
got you.
counseling therapist as well. So I had all the training in like what cognitive behavioral therapy is, a little bit of that like surface level of neuroscience, like how the brain responds to certain,
Mm,
like stimulus and things like that. So, how can we activate certain memories, certain things? So I had all of that. I just couldn't facilitate the actual like healing
mhm.
conversations. So it
But
was just the music, and then I would hand it over to
I
somebody else basically.
I could see that being frustrating because for a second here, bear with me. Hippie Deacon's about to come out real quick. The way I see music is a very from its source of creation, it's very soulful. It's very there's it's subjective and it's just creation. It's energy, in my
Mhm.
opinion. Um, to be able to provide that and provide benefit to somebody through your source of energy, and then not be able to, I guess, kind of get that closure of the experience. I feel like that would to me would be a very pivotal point or a pivotal disconnect in order to really provide like a service or benefit to somebody. So I can see that
Yeah.
being frustrating. However, you know, I wasn't even thinking this before we hopped on this call, but if you're a recruiter, they always say we're basically 50% therapists
Oh
to our
yeah.
candidates.
Oh yeah.
So I would imagine then that background and that mindset that you already had before, in some ways, had to have carried over. Um,
Yeah.
I would say it's true based on just observing you and over the years and learning from you. So, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely, that was part of how I ended up in recruiting, when I realized that, music therapy wasn't something I wanted to do for a career. I started looking at other options where I could find ways to really help people, and really, see the results of the work that I've put in, to help people achieve what they want. So, ending up in recruiting, like you said, just perfect. I didn't know I was signing up for that part of it
Mhm.
when I, saw recruiting. I just saw like, oh, it's helping people get jobs. Like that sounds good, sounds beneficial. So let's
Same
give it a
here.
shot. So, but yeah, it's a therapist role in some senses, talking through the anxiety before a job interview, letting them know like afterwards like hey you did great, or like sometimes it's the hey here's some things you need to work on, and like that's always a little bit harder of a conversation, but either way it's constructive, and
Hmm.
people, it's about people's growth, it's about how to come back and do better in the future. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of similarities.
For sure. And actually, I want to touch on that the feedback piece. Um, I think just to give some context about Caitlin, right? A few years back when I first started at Populous Group before COVID, so we're all in the office and things like that. Um, what's funny about Caitlin is when people first meet Caitlin, she's very seemingly timid and quiet, reserved in a way. She's not the loudest person in the room. She's not
Stereotypical introvert, like
there you go.
yeah.
But me and just like even Com, who worked with us, one day he called me up and just said, "Yo, Caitlin's a beast. She don't mess around and all that stuff." And I'm like, "Yeah, Caitlin's no joke. She may seem like she's just sitting there chilling, but one thing I noticed, I'm rambling now. Back at Populous, I remember you giving feedback to a candidate, or either it was after an interview or before, or whatever way it was, you were laying down the law in some type of way. And I remember looking back like, "Damn, Caitlin." But I think
Oh my
that's
gosh.
so necessary. It's
Yeah.
honest, it's true, and I mean, sugarcoating does nobody any good, especially when you're trying to improve. You're a candidate, you need feedback. You got to give the good and the bad.
Yeah.
So,
I know I needed it when I was first looking for jobs. Like, I had a music therapy background. I had no idea what I was doing in corporate. It took a couple interviews of maybe not going so well. And I had somebody give me some feedback, and I was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Like, and it's hard to take in the moment, but at the same time it's like oh my gosh, like where would I be without that, because they saw something that I didn't even know I was doing that was
mhm,
kind of putting hiring teams off. And so just being that for other people, I always try to be constructive. I hate doing it, honestly. It's never a fun conversation, but like I said, if it's about somebody's growth, like I'm going to be transparent about that.
100%. And that is one thing I admire about you and other recruiters too that take that approach. Um, I think that's just a huge element that builds trust and rapport in the end of the day. So, but yeah, speaking of, let's get into the I guess the professional journey for you. This I didn't know until today. I was doing my recruiter thing and stalking your LinkedIn. I saw before Populous Group, before recruiting, you were in technical sales of some sort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I after, after college with music therapy, I was looking at different things. What can I do? Want to help people, looking for something corporate. I knew I wanted to do like pretty much like, Monday through Friday type of job. I was kind of done with like the all hours of the night serving and stuff like that. So, I had a friend in sales, and he was like, I think you could do this. It doesn't require like a certain educational background. It helps if you have one, but it's not needed. There's some people I work with who don't have it. You just really need to have good communication skills. So I was like, okay, cool. I'll try for sales. So landed at this tech firm actually, and I was selling some software. Now I didn't know much about tech at all. I had like no tech background. I knew enough to like open Outlook,
Hmm.
that was about it. So I had to learn everything there. Basically, this company was selling a software for larger tech companies. Think, companies that have these like rooms and rooms of servers.
Yeah.
And this software helped them to essentially diagram their server map. So this was used for maintenance, troubleshooting, things like that. So um, I wouldn't say it's like the best working experience that I had, but this definitely opened the door to technology for me. And I realized, like, oh my gosh, like I really like this. I like the people I'm talking to on the other end of the phone, even though they were probably mostly annoyed with me because I was mostly cold calling them and being annoying. So
Right.
there was that
It's
element.
sales.
Yeah, exactly. So, after doing that for a while, I kind of realized like there wasn't as much growth within the company. I wanted to move on. So I just basically opened my preferences on LinkedIn. And then somebody from Populous Group found me and said, hey, I see your technical background. Have you thought about technical recruiting? And I was like, actually, that's something I was considering like before I landed in sales. Like it was sales or recruiting that kind of
Mm.
had my eye like, yeah, let's chat. So landed at Populous Group, started doing some tech recruiting there. I think I was brought on because of some of the tech knowledge I had. Um, it
It,
wasn't
ma-
much
it makes
really.
it, but it
Yeah,
makes a huge difference
it
because
does.
I mean, every single day, or maybe not right now, but every single day, there's a new recruiter coming to the industry in the tech space that has no clue, and none of us do when we start.
Right.
The joke is recruiters just kind of fall into recruiting some type of way, more or
Yeah,
less. But yeah,
seriously.
I didn't know about the technical background there. And it kind of sparked some interest for me given, when we were at Microsoft and the hiring freezes and all that stuff started happening and we were both shifted over to the more sales recruiting type of team. Um, I was learning about a lot of the similarities between a technical recruiter and a technical sales rep. Uh,
Mhm.
it's all about asking the right questions, understanding the software or the solution, cloud solution, whatever it is, and being able to ask the really just dig in and ask the right questions to find a solution. It's not
Yeah.
really selling. I think the best recruiters don't try to sell a role. They try to understand the person and understand what role fits, what makes sense. And the same with sales. So, um, did that did that help you go into Populous Group? Because I
I
know when
think
I first did a technical role, I can only imagine what that first call sounded like. I'm sure I sounded like an idiot.
man, it's always rough the first call. And several after sometimes to be transparent. Um,
Even
I
still.
don't I I honestly think like knowing what I've learned since being at Microsoft, that would have helped me a lot more in the sales
Mhm.
position before. I think it gave me some general knowledge of like the difference between hardware and software and maybe how they interact. I didn't know that much. You know, when it came to like the programming languages of software developers and things like that, I was learning everything from scratch at Populous Group still. So it gave me a little bit of an advantage, but I wouldn't say it like, helped a ton. I think it definitely helped just getting some of that knowledge in. But it wasn't, there was still plenty to learn at that point.
For sure. And there always is, because
Yeah.
in the end of the day, even the best software developer always has something to learn because technology evolves. That's
So
kind of the whole,
fast.
yeah,
Yeah.
you
You
got to
have
keep
to
up.
be learning. Yeah.
Right. So then with Populous Group, um why Populous Group? I know someone reached out to you. I don't know if it was Jen or Bree,
I think
but
it was Jen. Yeah.
Jen. Okay, shout out
Yeah.
to Jen and shout out to Bree. They're both great.
Yeah.
Why did you choose? What was it about Populous that you were like, you know what, this is the spot?
I think, it was working in something that I had a little bit of knowledge in, like coming in to work with tech. I was like, okay, I can learn this at least. Like I've shown that I can learn some of this. Populous Group was also really known for their culture. And I remember throughout the whole interview process, that was just reiterated over and over again. And I felt like, working there, talking with the person who ended up being our boss, I was like, wow, like he's just a real guy. Like he wants to get to know me. He's going to challenge me for sure, but like he just wants to get to know me and cares about me, like who I am as a person. I remember we were talking a little bit about like music and stuff like that during the interview, which I never expected to really come up during a technical recruiting interview. So it was just kind of neat to see that like they really cared about me as a person. And so, when I was looking for different companies, I want to work for a place that, I feel like I can blend well within the culture, but also I'm proud to represent. So, Populous Group kind of made that easy for me at that stage in my career.
I'd have to agree, and same for me. I remember I turned down an offer to go to Populous Group that I was pretty much. It was looking like I was going to this other place for my first
Hmm.
job after basketball and all that, but just the conversations I had with each the two recruiters, and then Steve, who was our boss, he sealed the deal for me. It
Yeah.
was yeah, everyone talks about culture, but he really showed me that at least to the least extent he was really about that. And when
Yeah.
I got there, it really was, family first type of approach, team one, team two, we called it.
Yeah.
Work is team two, your family team one. But here's the question. I'm going to share this that I asked Steve that to me was everything. And like you said, you guys talked about music, and it was like I didn't expect this in an interview. I asked him
Yeah.
straight up, "Hey, look, Steve. I've been playing basketball for the past 4 years. I don't. I'm not the most professional. I'm not polished. I'm raw. Professional emails. I mean, I can write. I know English and all that type of stuff. And then I dropped the bomb on him, with all this diversity and inclusion and stuff. I said, I'm black. I don't always speak properly or proper. I speak how I speak. I have the mouth of a sailor sometimes coming from a basketball court. That's not a black thing. But I mean, I said, is this going to be an issue? And his tone just switched completely. He went from professional Steve to Steve.
Yeah.
He said, look here, brother. I like how he said brother too. Look
There
here,
you
brother.
go.
I don't care what color you are. I don't care how you speak. I don't care about none of that. I look for people that work hard and are team members and they want to learn. I look for the right people. I don't care about all that other shit. I think he said,
Yeah.
get your work done. That's all I care about. I said, all right, I'm ready to run through a brick wall right now.
As you're saying that, I can almost hear Steve's voice saying it because that's just like it's so how he would switch. He'd be business Steve and then he'd be just Steve. So
Right. He knew when to turn it on when it was needed, and I
yeah.
always appreciated about that about him. He never BS'd anything. But so Populous group, then I for both of us actually, there were 2 different types of accounts. Now this was like
Mhm.
staffing, recruiting. We had our, what we called MSP. Uh, 2 main clients were Amazon and Microsoft,
Mhm.
coincidentally. And then we had the more technical side. So I know that we did both at one
Yeah.
time or another. I think you switched from the technical to MSP and then back, I believe. So tell me about that
Yeah.
and what were the differences for you there?
Yeah, I actually started on MSP with Microsoft
Okay.
for like the first 6 months or so that I worked there. At that point, I think that was just a few months after you came in, maybe probably about 6 months into my time there. Um, I had switched over then to the more technical side. So the technical side was essentially working as someone who could sponsor for candidates who required sponsorship. So think of like the H-1B candidates or candidates who are coming out of school and have some sponsorship, but they're going to need that H-1B in the future. So things like that. So working with a lot more clients at that point, but really just trying to make sure that these people have their work secured so that they could continue to work in the United States. So most of those roles were technical. Having an H-1B, there are certain limitations to the kind of work that you can have. And I think the most popular one is in the technical side. So development of software, stuff like
Data
that.
engineer
Data
or,
engineer.
yeah,
Yeah.
machine learning, AI, all that type of stuff. The
Yeah.
STEM,
STEM fields.
STEM
Yeah.
fields. There you go.
Yeah.
Um, and and uh, and even with the MSP account, which was I think I started on Visa actually.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So there was Visa, Microsoft, and Amazon. With those, uh, there were technical roles. There were also
Mhm.
HR roles. There were sometimes we were recruiting recruiters, or marketing people, or business analysts. It was kind of everything.
Yeah.
No, there wasn't really like a vertical, a talent
Right.
vertical, things like that. So, did you prefer that versus technical, like just all technical, or did you like having a wide range of exposure?
I think at the time I really liked the wide range. Part of that was because I didn't understand as much about the technical as I do now. I definitely did some research on my own. There was some really good training. I just didn't quite understand all of what went into that to be able to ask all of the right questions. So I kind of liked the variety.
Mhm,
Just tech was a little hard for me at the time. So I liked the variety. I think it also had to do a little bit with the business model.
mhm.
When it was all these different, you know, verticals, all these different careers, but it was
Clients
one
and
client
mhm,
essentially that I was supporting, or a couple at a time maybe, but they were similar. I could
mhm.
kind of understand like what these clients want.
Right.
And so that helped a little bit when there were so many different clients and so many different kinds of
Regarding
technology.
regarding the tech recruiting where it was
Yeah, on the
bunch of different clients. Yep.
yeah,
I just
lots
wanted
of
to clear
different
that up.
clients. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, in the tech recruiting, when there were so many different clients, it was hard to know like what does each one of them want? Like, is this
Mhm.
person even a good fit for this client and
Right.
stuff like that. So
It
at the time, yeah, I did prefer a little bit more of like the MSP side, as we call it. So variety of roles. I remember kind of really enjoying like some of the data roles and then like project and program management. Like that was
same.
that was kind of a fun vertical for me. But um yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No, for sure. And that's the I think that's the challenge with staffing recruiting is you can research all these different clients that you have, and unless you're the one who really has the relationship with that company or client, right? You can really only know so much. And when those trivial questions come in from a candidate, like what's their culture like, or what's the commute, how much, what's their any type of small details about the company,
Do they have lunch on
or
site? Like,
yeah,
yeah.
or why are they hiring? It's you may
Yeah.
not always have that information, and it does make it harder to create buy-in and to be able to confidently say, hey, I think this is a good opportunity for you, as
Yeah.
opposed to sticking with one client and really over time learning that client, or being in the corporate space, which is kind of the segue into Microsoft, right?
Yeah.
Now, you stayed at before going to Microsoft. You got out of recruiting actually.
Hmm.
You went over to our payroll side at Populous, which Populous Group was a pretty much full
They're a
all-inclusive HR
payroll.
service,
Yeah. Yeah.
for contingent workforce. Um, why did you go before we go into Microsoft? Why did you switch over to that? I know it was COVID and it was a stressful time for everybody, so
It
that might
was.
have something to do with it.
Definitely. Yeah. No, it was kind of a rough season in recruiting in general. During COVID, everyone was like, I don't know if we can hire, like what's happening. So, as I was looking like into the future, like what does Populous Group have for me? How can I continue to grow here? I kind of saw like the next level in recruiting, and realized, where I was at with, at this time, I had switched back to fully supporting the MSP side. Hitting that next level, like the senior recruiter mark, was just going to be really difficult under that
Mhm.
model. Now things have changed since then. They have a little bit different model now. There's ways
Yeah.
to make more money faster. This
Mhm.
was just my experience at the time.
Right.
So
And
looking
COVID. You
and
always got to throw.
COVID.
I mean,
Yeah.
no one had a
Yeah.
playbook for that.
Right, right. We were writing it as we went. So, I wanted growth. I wanted to eventually, advance my career. I had done this a couple years at the time. So I was like, okay, I've got to find what's next. So I really liked Populous Group, great company. Like we already talked about, good culture, good work-life balance, stuff like that. So I wasn't too keen on leaving for an unknown, if I hadn't explored some other opportunities. So really transparent conversations with Steve, and just kind of saying like, look, this is where I'm at. Like I'm feeling a little stuck. I'm a little frustrated. Like what can I do? So we were kind of looking at different options, and payroll was kind of the one that came up as maybe a good fit.
Mhm.
So what I saw in payroll was a little bit more of like a structured outline for growth, being able to hit, tier one, tier two, tier three, a bit faster. It was a little bit less pressure as far as like heavy metrics.
Mhm.
It was more about quality over, controlling the income of it. I wasn't responsible for a certain number of spread on the board or things like that. It was more about make sure the data's right, make sure
Right.
people have cleared everything they need to clear before starting. So I switched over to that. I did that for about 6 or 7 months, before moving to Microsoft. So during that time, I definitely learned a lot about the process, what goes on behind the scenes when you're onboarding at a new position and stuff like that. Ultimately, the option with Microsoft just kind of came up at a good time and made sense for me to switch back. I was starting to miss recruiting. I missed the one-on-one
Mhm.
relationships that you build with people. I still was on the phone a lot,
Mhm.
but nobody was really like thrilled to talk about their job. I
Right.
tried to get it out of some people, but they're like, "Yeah, I'm just this, I'm a project manager." I'm like,
Right.
"Oh, great! Like, what are you excited about?" And they're like, "Well, it's just
Let's
a good
get
opportunity.
let's just
What
get this
what
over with.
paper do I need to sign?"
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
exactly, exactly.
definitely the more transactional part of
Yeah,
the business operationally. But with that structure you saw of like growth, it was more structured, it was more laid out. I guess
yeah,
the sacrifice there was the you no longer can make your own schedules, essentially
right.
the autonomy.
Yeah,
Just goof off in what we call the pit with the other recruiters between calls and stuff, and just that was a fun time, and it
it
was
was it was a good time.
that's one thing I miss about working in an office. But so then, where I guess when Microsoft became an opportunity, were you already thinking, all right, I think maybe I want to get back into recruiting, or and also did your experience, although good, a learning experience in the payroll side of things, did it kind of reinforce the passion, let's say, for recruiting and things like that?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I had kind of been thinking like really honestly, it was maybe only 3 or 4 months in. I was like, "Man, kind of miss some of that." Like
Mhm.
I missed like the friendly competition. I missed the hustle behind it. I missed, like I said, the one-on-one connections with people. So I was starting to think like, did I switch too soon? Like what else is out there? Maybe I should start looking back into that. And then, the opportunity came up and it was just a good time in
Mm.
general. It was toward the end of the year. I had, kind of wrapped up a good amount with the accounts I was at. So it was perfect timing for that.
Right. And to relate back to your music experience, and I always use my experience as an athlete in this space. We've
Mhm.
talked about this before. Um, Going back to recruiting, you mentioned the competition, also uh, the one-on-one connection. That's all kind of gray area stuff in some ways.
It is.
When you're making sure data is right, it's pretty black and white. There's really no process. There is a pro- there's less room for process refinement within your day to day.
Yeah.
As with music, that's a subjective art. It's art. I sometimes looked at basketball as art, the way you put moves together, there's creativity there, but you had to continuously refine that craft.
Mhm.
And you had to make it your own. And I bring this up because I feel like with recruiting, that's a big part of, I mean, your outreach message, the way
Yeah.
you conduct your phone screens or uh, your style of email communication, all of those things, it's customized to your personality. That you can't be a robot as a recruiter.
Yeah.
So, um, what coming to Microsoft, then what for me, I was able to dive into that a little bit more because I loved the sourcing aspect and I loved technology. I love the training that we got from Microsoft. It was top notch.
Mhm.
It, tell me about your process and the refinement as you got back into recruiting and you realized, oh, this is it.
Yeah, this is good stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it was great because I felt like I really had a chance to put myself into it, be myself. And I didn't have to follow any specific templates. There were certain, templates that I had to use and refine a little bit, but I just got to be myself. So I think it was really kind of for the first time where I got to develop my own style on the phone. Definitely did some of that at Populous Group, but to some extent, there were a little bit of restrictions on that, I would say.
Hmm.
Um, with Microsoft, I was able to just be myself, only ask the person on the other end of the phone to be themselves, and just see if we could work together. So it was really a good learning experience in that, being able to decide like what do I want to do, like what is the best style, how do I communicate best, things like that. So yeah, it was a really great experience with that. Obviously, like you said, the training was top notch too.
It
So
was.
being able to understand a lot more of what went into software building and everything like that gave me the ability to ask the questions and kind of have the freedom to,
Hmm.
add my style. If I'm just trying to figure out like, is this a go or not?
Right.
There's less of that personal connection and more of like, does it check the box type of
Hmm.
communication? So just having that knowledge, I think, really lifted up that weight of like just checking the boxes. Obviously, we check the boxes.
Right. Right.
That had to happen naturally, but
Hmm.
it was
But not
just
with a
more
sheet of
through.
paper. I always make this joke.
Yeah,
If anyone's seen my Deacon Speaks channel, I talk about this all the time. We're not just getting a sheet of paper saying, on a scale of 1 to 10, how
right,
proficient are you in Java?
right.
It's not going to do anything. They could say 13, and I'd be like, okay, it's more about
But
diving
why?
into, yeah,
Yeah,
diving
why are
into
you at
the
13?
what you're doing with the I guess the programming language or what the project is, the service to the business, all that stuff. We won't
Yeah.
get too far into that, but I do want to segue then into the difference between staffing and corporate recruiting, and your preferences, because with that process refinement, it does make it harder in staffing when you got different variables, like
Mhm.
different clients, a bunch of different talent verticals, a bunch of different salary levels, and things like that. For Microsoft, and I think not in all corporate settings, but where we were, it was all pretty much, we were looking for engineers. We're only working from Microsoft, right? And you know, it gave us the ability to really dive into that work, that profile, and what Microsoft was doing, what they were looking for, what a good candidate was to them, and then refine our process, our communication styles, and see what worked, what didn't, and switch up when we need to, and things like that. So I know I just rambled. I do that. Uh, but yeah, tell me about your preferences, staffing, corporate. Do you see any of the things that I just mentioned, or what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think everything you said, I definitely agree with. Staffing it gives you a lot of variety. It's kind of fun in that sense because there is so many different things to learn and different types of people to work with. However, it is really fast paced. Usually a rec is posted, and you've got about 2 or 3 days to
Mhm.
really get your candidates in. You're competing with people on your own team, you're competing with other agencies who also have the same rec. So, staffing definitely taught me like how to find the best candidates, like how to
Mhm.
refine, look past the job description, like what are they really looking for and finding those really strong candidates as opposed to somebody who maybe qualifies but isn't going to get the interview just because there's so many other candidates. So,
Mhm.
yeah, that was kind of what I learned from that. I would say, as far as preference goes, I do prefer the corporate setting a bit more. Having essentially one role to really focus on. Now, it wouldn't always have to be just one role, but just having an area to master, basically,
Mhm.
to the point where I could, like you said, refine and be able to adjust my own process, ask my own questions, learn a little bit through trial and error, like what works and what doesn't. And just be able to really master that, know exactly what they're looking for. I really enjoyed that
Mhm.
personally. I like a consistent type of environment though. So, it's still fast paced, there's still always stuff to do.
Mhm.
Um, it is kind of competitive still because you
Right.
have so many recruiters, putting their candidates in, but, I just felt like that was a better fit for me personally.
Mhm.
I
Same.
would say too, I also liked the event model. I know, not every company would do things this way, but having the events was kind of nice because we would work really hard to set up for that event and then
Mhm.
watch it happen. But then there was always like a target
Mhm.
on the calendar. So it wasn't just, a couple days. It was usually like maybe a month in advance or so we were starting to prepare and get people ramped up and get them prepped for the interview. And it was just exciting to
It
watch
was.
that process come together and kind of, experience the cycle over and over on a
Right.
monthly basis. So it was fun.
And I agree, it was a very exciting, when the hiring events, as we call them, were preset monthly, and you knew when they were coming. It's that buildup of excitement and anticipation in that type of way, and you know the candidates felt it too. Like periodically throughout the month, you're reaching out to your candidates, seeing how they're doing, checking in, doing interview preps, and they get more and more excited. Or maybe you
Yeah.
start to feel that they're getting more and more nervous, and you kind of have to be a therapist. Like, I don't want to say therapist, but you know what I mean, and kind of really read the room, and
Yeah.
and lead them the right type of way, there at least mentally and emotionally, to keep
Hmm.
them prepared. But one question I always ask myself with the events model, since essentially with these hiring events, we were looking for a general software engineer profile. It wasn't for specific job recs necessarily. And I would ask myself, am I boxing myself in terms of what how knowledgeable I can be across the spectrum here. But I came to find that with the ability to master or really hone in and refine the information or the topic of this software engineer right here and what they do, really understand it, go
Mhm.
deep with them, and you even go deep with the candidate to the point where they're like, these are some good questions. I wasn't expecting this type of thing. You start to understand what doesn't fall in.
Mhm.
And then with that, there's still some intersect maybe. Maybe it's like, all right, but this still could be a good candidate. So it forces you to really dive into these other things too. You kind of branch out. And I'm rambling again. I don't know if anyone understands what I mean, but I think through mastering one piece of the puzzle, or not, really understanding one piece of the puzzle, really opened up the door to the whole picture, how
Mhm.
things connect, what intersects, what doesn't, what's going to be a kind of a stretch here versus I can really build even though this profile doesn't really fit, I think I can build a case because of XYZ. So I don't know if you saw that, um, or am I just is the deacon just speaking right now?
No, I mean, there's definitely, we always look for the people who we know would kind of fit the type of role, but then as we get on the phone and start talking to people, we realize maybe passions are a little bit different sometimes, or a background's a little bit different. So then at that point, like you said, it's looking for ways to either make it work, or give them the option of like, hey, this is what you would be doing, is this what you want
Mhm.
to do, and kind of coming to a decision together on
Right.
that, whether to move forward or not. And sometimes you do have to stretch it a little bit, I would say.
Mhm.
We certainly have a set of like requirements that we have to follow, but to some extent, if the person has the demonstrated ability, or they've been doing all the right things and maybe just haven't been given the shot to do everything at once that is required from the job description. There's ways to, look and try and make a case for that. So,
So many nuances,
yeah,
and
yeah,
and
so many
that's
nuances.
that's where I think the psychology part of me sometimes I think kind of helped trying to find like let's say the diamond in the rough type of candidate that it doesn't fit, but you just kind of see something. It's like that emotional intelligence, which I
Yeah,
know you have as well, which I think makes you a great recruiter. You can see these things,
thanks.
and you also don't BS with candidates. That's one thing I always admired. Um, so for hiring managers and recruiters who's listening, okay, so Caitlin is looking for more of that corporate space. Technology, speaking of technology, you mentioned before that you kind of you didn't know much about it at first, and then you kind of liked the MSP accounts better. That had the wide range of type of skill sets. How about now? Is that the same now, or are you at this point, given the experience with Microsoft, like, no, I get it now, and I like this?
Man,
I'm kind of projecting right now because that's the case for
yeah.
me.
No, no, I'm with you. Like I get the technology and I'm hooked. Like
Yeah,
I
same.
love it. So I will say from my experience with Microsoft, we did a lot of work on just like the software engineering profile, kind
Mhm,
of like mid-level, a little bit of experience, but still a lot of room to mold a person
mhm,
into what they want to become. So that was awesome. One thing I wanted to mention was how you and I both had the opportunity to be selected by our leaders to help with a hydration investment project with
mhm,
the go-to-market team
mhm,
for a short amount of time. So this is when tech started getting a little rocky. There wasn't necessarily as much work on the software engineering side. So our leadership approached us each and said, hey, how would you like to try something on and help out with this team? They really need you right now. So we both had a chance to do that. And during that time, we were, well, I guess we were kind of split up in that, doing a little bit different skill set. But
Yeah.
I kind of liked what I was doing too. In that section, I was doing like cloud solutions architects. So people who interface with their clients and help them basically meet them where they're at in their cloud journey.
Hmm.
Sometimes people already have a cloud environment, sometimes they have a hybrid cloud environment and they need to condense to just a single cloud.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's just expanding for scalability, and getting to talk with those people was really fun. I definitely learned a lot through that as well. So I really didn't know like how all of the clouds like work together
Right.
before that. So that was a really cool experience to learn about that. So, to future hiring teams, things
Yeah.
like that, software engineering, definitely have a strong background there. Cloud engineering is also
Right.
something that I'm interested in. I liked it while I did it.
Right.
Not as extensive experience with that, but got the
But
foundations there. So
exactly the foundation and the understanding of where the I guess within the process of business and technology software, let's say a platform as a service, software as a service, or an application that a software engineer is building, where down the line it's going to end up, how it connects with like with these solution architects, right? And
yeah.
tying into, you were working with architects, I was working with solution sellers. So
Hmm.
they were half sales, half technical people, kind of hybrids there. I always explained it as, you got your, within the go to market experience, you have your sales, full on salespeople, business development, lead generation. Our solution sellers weren't getting the why, the buy-in for the why use our services. They were selling the
Hmm.
how do we get to implementation and deployment. And it's my understanding that those architects that you were working with, they were very technical but also customer facing, and they were controlling or driving the actual go to market, like
Yeah.
let's implement and let's deliver.
Yeah.
So it's
Here's
really
your
cool
plan.
to,
Let's roll. Yeah.
exactly, so it was definitely a great opportunity to see how those different, the engineering elements and the delivery elements, where they come together. So
Hmm.
huge thing there. Yeah. Last, I think the last thing, because of course right now we're kind of covering what you're looking for and stuff. Let's see, sourcing versus recruiting. What are your thoughts there? Because we were sourcers at Microsoft. I love that. Me personally, I prefer sourcing rather than recruiting, negotiations, and all that stuff. And it's more HR, business partner type of stuff. But that's just me. How about you? What are you open to? Because we both have experience with both.
Yeah. I
So
think, working with Populous Group definitely gave me good insight as to what goes into the full recruiting cycle. But, sourcing was really fun too. I really enjoyed that. I think, my first preference would probably be more of a sourcing role. If anything, I would be open to doing full cycle,
mhm,
where I'm closing too, but also sourcing. I don't think I'd want to get away from that
the sourcing.
sourcing
Yeah,
component altogether. So, yeah, next
same.
job should be definitely sourcing focused.
Absolutely, I agree. It was the sourcing for me uh, really brought the passion back to recruiting for me. I was actually looking to get out of
Yeah,
recruiting before Microsoft came
right.
about, and now, and I think as a sourcer, you're basically a podcast host every single day. You're just asking questions, and
Yeah.
as I started getting, if it got more and more tedious, let's say, because anything you do a lot will, I started opening up those conversations. I was some conversations I was quite eccentric. A lot of laughing, a lot of, just really connecting in that sense. Really
Oh,
corny.
yeah.
I'm a corny guy. I mean, I'm sure you guys could tell already. But um that kind of brought the idea for all of this. I was like, you know what? I like doing this. I really do. And thanks to sourcing and Microsoft, that's one influence as to why TalentXM is here. So, um but yeah, I think we kind of covered everything. I think we went a little bit over time, but no worries, everybody. I'm gonna clip this up, put some titles and stuff. But anything, you know, for anyone that's listening, any recruiters out there that have connections, anything else that you wanna say, share about Caitlin Hire. I mean, your last name is Hire.
And I mean, like, it's
That's
just
what you
in the
do.
name. It's in the name. That's what I got.
Facts.
Yeah, it is my real name, so no, it's not a stage name
Oh,
or
so you're not
anything.
you're not that dedicated to
I'm
recruiting?
not, yeah, actually, I'm so dedicated, I changed my name to it for
Yeah, we'll s
real.
we'll stick with that. We'll stick with that.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
okay,
so, no, yeah, I
yeah,
can't really think of anything else. I think we covered a lot of, like, who I am, what I'm looking for. Good conversation
yeah,
too. It's kind of fun looking back on, what all we've been through, how we got to where we are, and the good and the bad, and crazy times going through COVID and everything. Like, everybody has been through it. We all had to
mhm,
learn, but just thinking back through all the craziness, like how we ended up where we are, it's just so cool. So
yeah.
yeah, good conversations.
For sure, and thank you for being here. That's pretty much everything. I think, um, I mean, there's been so much support on LinkedIn in the recruiting community right now. It's awesome to see. So hopefully, any recruiters they see this, just share this around. Um, anyone that is, of course, anyone that is looking for a job, and you feel like a link to a little interview here and a blog post about you, I'll do all that. Will help on your application in that personal website section. Go to the website, talentxm.co, shoot me an email. Let's just have a conversation. We'll go from there. So, yeah, the hard parts are always intros and signing off, but I think that's it. This was Caitlin Hire. I'm Mark the Deacon Holmes. This was Talent XM. Thank you all for being here. Peace.